Hey there, you ready to get your learn on? Today we're diving deep into one of the most notorious corporate scandals in history, Enron. You've sent us a stack of articles and research about it, so we know you're eager to unpack how this energy giant went from a Wall Street darling to bankrupt in the blink of an eye.
That's right. We'll explore the intricate web of accounting tricks, shady partnerships, and high-stakes energy trading that led to Enron's spectacular downfall.
Buckle up, because this deep dive is going to take us through a fascinating tale of ambition, deception, and the consequences of unchecked greed. Okay, so before we get to the collapse, let's rewind a bit. Where did Enron even come from? What were they like in the beginning?
Well, their roots go way back, actually. One of Enron's predecessors started as just a small natural gas pipeline company back in 1930. They were called Inter-North, based in Omaha, Nebraska. It's kind of interesting. They actually thrived during the Great Depression thanks to low gas prices and, a ready workforce.
Small town beginnings, huh? But I'm guessing they didn't stay small for long.
No, not at all. Inter-North had a real appetite for growth and acquired, a bunch of energy companies over the next few decades. By the 1980s, they were already a major player in the natural gas industry. And they even tried their hand at things like plastics.
Then came the merger, right? The one that really put them on the map, the merger with Belco Petroleum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In 1983, they merged with Belco, which was a Fortune 500 oil exploration company. It was a huge move, a real power play. Showed they weren't content with just being a gas company.
So already a big force in the energy world. And then that final merger that created Enron as we know it, the one with Houston Natural Gas.
Right. In 1985, Inter-North merged with Houston Natural Gas, led by this ambitious guy, Ken Lay. They became Enron, headquartered in Houston. And this merger, well, it really set them on the path to becoming a global energy giant.
Okay, so here's where things get interesting, right? On the surface, Enron seemed like this incredible success story, but of course, appearances can be deceiving. When did the cracks start to show?
Well, from the start, Enron's leaders were all about pushing boundaries, which, isn't always bad. They were really at the forefront of energy deregulation, which created all these new opportunities, but also opened the door to some, let's say, questionable practices.
Let's talk about those practices. Mark-to-market accounting. This term keeps popping up everywhere. Can you explain exactly what it is and how Enron, kind of twisted it to their advantage?
Sure. So mark-to-market accounting, in itself, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It lets companies record the current value of their assets, even if they haven't actually sold them yet. And it's supposed to give a more accurate picture of their financial situation.
Okay, so it makes sense in theory, but Enron found a way to, kind of game the system.
Yeah, they did. They basically exploited the subjective nature of mark-to-market accounting. Instead of using conservative estimates for future profits, they really inflated their projections. Essentially, they were booking these potential future profits as if they were current revenue.
Wait, so they were just inventing profits? How is that even allowed?
Well, it's complicated, but they made it work for a while. This made their financial performance look way better than it actually was, and their stock price just soared. But it's all smoke and mirrors, really.
So they were cooking the books, making themselves look much more successful than they were. Weren't there any regulations or oversight to stop this kind of manipulation?
There were, but Enron was clever. They created this really complex web of special purpose entities, or SPEs. Think of SPEs like secret compartments where Enron stashed all the stuff they didn't want investors to see, billions in debt. Risky investments.
It's just mind-boggling that they were able to get away with this for so long. There's this story about Jeffrey Skilling, Enron's CEO, that I think really captures their arrogance, maybe. During a conference call with analysts, one analyst, dared to question their accounting.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic Enron moment. Skilling, he was known for being, really smart, but also kind of sharp-tongued. He just, tore into the analyst, didn't even try to hide his contempt. It was obvious they thought they were untouchable.
And this was all happening during the dot-com boom when investors were throwing money at anything that sounded remotely tech-related.
Well,
Enron, with its online energy trading platform, was, riding that wave. But things were about to get a whole lot worse, right?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
And that brings us to Enron's role in the California energy crisis. Now, that really exposed their ruthlessness. So California back then, they were having a rough time. Newly deregulated energy market, prices were skyrocketing, rolling blackouts across the state. And Enron, well, they weren't just watching this happen.
They were like, profiting off California's misery? How?
Enron's traders, they saw this whole situation as a huge opportunity. They used all these complex trading strategies and basically manipulated the energy supply and demand to jack up those electricity prices.
That's just messed up. Weren't they worried about getting caught?
Didn't seem like it. There are recordings of Enron traders, like, laughing about the money they were making from California's pain. One even joked about stealing from grandmothers. It's shocking, really.
It's creepy hearing how casually they talked about exploiting a whole state. And we can't forget Enron's political connections, right? They were spending millions lobbying politicians, close ties to the Bush administration. Did that play a role in, letting them get away with this?
Oh, absolutely. Their influence in Washington, it helped them shape those deregulation policies, the ones that benefited them, even if they weren't good for regular people. It's like a textbook case of, what's it called? Regulatory capture.
Right.
Where those with the most money basically rigged the system.
So they helped create the system they were exploiting. Infuriating.
Yeah. But their tactics in California, that was just the beginning. Remember Sharon Watkins?
Yeah.
The Enron VP who blew the whistle?
Yes. That memo she sent to Ken Lay, it was a turning point. Yeah. What happened after that?
News of that memo, the SEC investigation, it sent shockwaves through the financial world. Investor confidence, gone, just like that. Enron stock, free fall. Went from like $90 a share to less than $1 by the end of November 2001.
Wow. Total collapse.
It was a financial earthquake, really. All that hidden dead, they couldn't hide it anymore, had to restate their earnings. Turned out they had billions in losses they'd kept off the books.
So the truth came out. What happened then?
Well, it was a disaster. Thousands of employees lost their jobs, their savings. A lot of it was in Enron stock, gone. Investors lost billions. Enron's reputation, destroyed. Really showed how corporate greed can have devastating consequences.
Did anyone, actually face consequences for this whole mess?
Oh, yeah. Ken Lay and Jeffrey Skilling, both convicted on fraud and conspiracy charges. Lay died before sentencing, but Skilling, he was initially sentenced to 24 years. It got reduced later, but still.
Well, 24 years. Sends a message, right? Can't just play with other people's money and get away with it.
It was a huge case, no doubt. But the impact, it went way beyond just punishing those guys. Led to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. Big reform bill meant to prevent another Enron.
The Sarbanes-Oxley Act, I remember hearing about that, but it always sounded so complicated. What did it actually do?
Think of it like a referee for corporations. Make sure they're playing by the rules, accounting-wise. Stricter regulations for accounting, more oversight of auditing firms. CEOs and CFOs, they had to personally vouch for their company's finances. And tougher penalties for fraud. Tried to protect whistleblowers, too.
So Enron's downfall, it kind of led to better safeguards to prevent future scandals?
In a way, yeah. Painful lesson, but it forced people to talk about corporate ethics, transparency and accountability.
Sounds like it was a step in the right direction. But has it actually worked? I mean, things are constantly changing, new technologies, more complex financial systems. Could something like Enron happen again today?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's possible, sure. There will always be people trying to, bend the rules. But I do think we're better at spotting fraud now, preventing it.
So it's not just about regulations, it's about, a change in mindset.
Right. We need more people like Sharon Watkins, people who'll speak up even when it's risky, more journalists digging deep, and a system that, encourages that kind of stuff.
So we can't just assume the system will protect us. We all got to stay informed, ask questions, hold those in power accountable.
Exactly. Change takes time, but it starts with what we do, as individuals. Enron shows us that even the biggest companies, they're not invincible.
That's a really important point. But even with all these safeguards, the financial world, it's still pretty complicated, kind of murky. What do you think long-term about Enron's impact? Did it really change how corporations work, or are we still vulnerable to this kind of ethical failure? That's the question I keep coming back to. Did Enron, actually change things? Or are we just waiting for the next big scandal?
Yeah, it's tough to say for sure. On one hand, Enron was this huge wake-up call. I mean, it showed us that corporate greed can happen anywhere, even in industries with all these rules and regulations. Sarbanes-Oxley, that was a direct response to Enron, trying to fix those weaknesses.
SOX definitely shook things up in corporate America, but some people say it created too much bureaucracy, mountains of paperwork that don't really address the human element.
That's true. You can have all the regulations in the world, but you can't completely eliminate greed,
Yeah.
or ambition. Enron's auditors, Arthur Andersen, they were supposed to be the watchdogs, but they were in on it too.
So it all comes back to people, right? Laws are important, But they're only as good as the people enforcing them. So if regulations alone can't prevent another Enron, what can? What's the biggest takeaway from all this?
For me, it's that real corporate responsibility. It goes beyond just following the rules. It's about building a culture of ethics from the top down, where doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. It's about, focusing on the long term, building trust with stakeholders, not just chasing profits.
So we need to change how we think about corporate success. It's not just about the bottom line anymore.
Right. And that starts with individuals. We need more people like Sharon Watkins, more journalists willing to investigate, expose the bad stuff, investors who demand transparency.
So we can't just rely on the regulators. We all have to do our part, stay informed, ask questions, hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely. It doesn't happen overnight, but change starts with us, what we do individually. Enron, it shows us that even the most powerful companies, they can be held accountable if people demand it.
That's a powerful thought. The Enron scandal, it was definitely a dark time. But there are valuable lessons there about ethics, transparency, and what we can do, as individuals.
It's a story we should keep talking about, keep learning from, because it reminds us that we always have to fight for accountability. It never really ends.
Well said. And for everyone listening, as you learn more about Enron and other scandals, think about this. What role can you play in making the business world more ethical, more transparent? What can you do, even small things, to hold those in power accountable?
Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep pushing for a better system. That's, I think, the real legacy we can create from something like Enron.
Great talking to you. Really appreciate you taking the time to break all this down.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.